You're listening to episode 14 of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide podcast. Hey everyone, Darlene here, your host, and welcome back to another episode of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide, the podcast that encourages you to stop dreaming and start doing. Welcome to the show. This week on the show, I speak with Collette Schultz of Savvy Subcontracting. And a quick story, Collette was a podcast guest of mine way back in 2009 in my previous podcast, A Virtual Perception. And so she was gracious enough to come back on this podcast. And this time we focused on goals and how to achieve your goals when you're a new business owner and some of the steps, or really small steps, you can take to move forward with your goals. And she also talks about subcontracting and how entering the business world as a subcontractor is a great way to get your feet wet. So without any further delay, here's my conversation with Collette Schultz. So Collette, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Darlene. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. So a little background. This is just a fun behind the scenes. Way back in, I guess it was 2009, Collette and I had connected, and she was on my previous podcast, The Virtual Perception, way back when. So it's super fun and exciting kind of for me to revisit and talk to people that I connected with years ago, now, and today. So it'll be fun to catch up with you.
Yeah. See where both of us have led our paths and go from there.
Right, where we landed, so to speak.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about your business and how long you've been a virtual assistant and how long you've been in business.
Well, I kind of want to give you a little bit of a background just so people are aware that it's okay very often you make changes in your business because things just don't work out. But it actually started out back in 2006. I started to supplement some income basically to take my kids or my family on a Disney World trip. So what I did then is I was doing virtual assistants. But kind of the turn on or the spin on things with that is I was actually working for another virtual assistant doing what I call subcontracting. I was basically doing the work of her clients. I wasn't working for her. And that's kind of where originally when I started my business, it was called Virtual Dreams Services or something like that. I don't even remember. But as I learned, it really had nothing to do with what I actually offer. And because I was working for another virtual assistant, the light bulb went off and I thought, that's a subcontracting niche. So then Savvy Subcontracting was born. Also, I was able to reach the goal of taking my family to Disney World in 2011. And the best news is now in 2016, I'm able to take them a second time because of my virtual assistant subcontracting business. I'm able to supplement income because I do actually work outside the home full time as a school district bookkeeper. So That's kind of where I am. I'm still doing it part time, but I do love it.
I have a question about the niche subcontracting because in the virtual world, I know of subcontractors, and I've done it myself because it's really a niche. When I think subcontracting niche, I think of you. I can't think of anybody else that has that as their niche.
Right.
How has that helped you with your business?
Well, at this point, I think there's a little confusion. People really get the word outsourcing and subcontracting mixed up. And the way I define it is outsourcing is when you have your projects or you have your task and you literally give them away or outsource them and have somebody else do it. When you subcontract, it's your client work that you want somebody else to take on. So you're subcontracting that client work. It's kind of in the construction world. You might be a builder, but you don't do the drywalling. But the drywalling is for your client services, not yours. So you subcontract that out, and it works exactly the same way. I would have to say in the last year is really when I've really become the guru of subcontracting for virtual assistants. So I'm really hoping it will continue to take off And I also have started a new podcast called Virtual Team 360, and that, too, I think is going to help educate. So I'm hoping that eventually I will have the full market of the subcontracting world.
Oh, that's awesome. I kind of want to take a step back now because you had mentioned that when you first started, one of your goals was to take your family on a Disney vacation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what I talk about in my ebook is goal setting. And so I want to kind of focus on that goal in terms of how did having that goal, going to Disney, help you stay on course with, you could have easily just said, well, I'm just going to stay at my work and my full-time job and wait to save up money. But how did having that goal in your VA business and your subcontracting business help you stay on course and move forward?
Right. And, I'm sure not all people are like this, but I am very goal-oriented. And I set small goals so I can see the accomplishment. One of the things I did, not only to set the goal of going to Disney World, but I knew it was probably going to take about 5 years before I could actually do it. The one thing I do have is a rewards credit card, so a portion of that was also how I paid for the trip. But in order to redeem points, I knew I had a 5-year period. So that's why I set the goal of 5 years from when I started my VA business to go to Disney World. In the meantime, while I was still saving for Disney World, I would set like 6-month goals for myself. Mm-hmm. For example, I wanted a new bedroom set. So what I did is I put a portion continued with the Disney World, and I put a portion to my earnings to the bedroom set. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, within 6 months, I was able to pay for the bedroom set. So then in my own little mind, I had to come up with another goal, and I think it was actually painting my house. I just set very small goals. So I can say, yep, I did that, check it off my list. So it really works for me rather than putting something out there that is not even reachable, just to set small goals and give yourself a timeline with it as well. Yeah,
I love the idea that you said with your rewards card, it had a 5-year, rewards used up in 5 years, so that was a perfect way to set that time frame. I love that.
And the other thing that's kind of cool, too, that you can do in your virtual assistant business, let's say you offer multiple services. What you could do is say, for example, my podcast, that income is going to pay for my next anniversary trip. The actual client work that I do, that's going to pay for something else. Break it down even further.
Well, you said that you reached your goal in 2011, and you're also going to go ahead and plan another trip this year. What was it like, though, when you realized, when you said, to your husband and family, we are doing this, we're going, what was that moment like to have, just everything came full circle and the goal was met?
Well, and it's kind of funny. My husband still, I don't think he wants to admit it, but he's impressed that I was able to accomplish that goal with my virtual assistant, business. And I don't even have to leave the house to do it. My husband is very hesitant to admit that the virtual assistant business is working. But being able to see that it not only happened once, but happened twice, it makes me smile inside because he's just not that kind of guy. Most guys would say, wow, that's pretty cool, but he just doesn't want to admit it.
I kind of now want to flip back to subcontracting because a lot of the people listening to this podcast are those thinking about starting a business. And so with subcontracting, you had mentioned it before, it's where you're working for someone else in a subcontracting way where you're helping them with their client's work. So do you think doing that is a good way for someone new entering the world of virtual assistants or construction or whatever it may be to get their feet wet? And if yeah, how come?
Exactly, and that's actually the whole reason I got into virtual assistants is because that's exactly. I met, her name is Diane Hess of Hess Business Professionals and Associates, and the nice thing about subcontracting, and it depends on who you're who you're working for, but a lot of them will kind of take you under their wing and say, you know what, I want to teach you how I do it, so you can become a good role model or the face of my company. So it is a great way. I have another contractor that I'm subcontracting for right now, and she does social media. And there again, she kind of took me under her wing. I knew nothing about social media scheduling or, about tweets or anything, but doing that continuous work has taught me how to be a social media strategist or a, scheduler. So yes, most definitely. And I think, trying to find that experience is sometimes the most difficult, but it's all in when it comes down to it, to try to find those people that will be willing to take you, even though you don't have the experience. It's just getting out there and networking and, start talking, and it'll come.
Right. You mentioned networking. What avenues? So this is going to be a two-part question. So I had originally planned to ask you, and I will, what advice you would give to someone that might like to subcontract, and extend that further. What are some tips for going about networking? Where any ideas where they can go or how to go about it?
Well, the one thing, if you're starting your virtual assistant business and you don't have a lot of money, don't waste money. Unfortunately, I just recently had a very bad experience with wasting my money, but there's a lot of forums out there that you can join that don't cost much. And actually now with Facebook, get on a virtual assistant Facebook group and start networking that way. Eventually, yes, I think paying for mastermind groups is extremely important, but there are so many other means for finding a network to work with. And another great way is to actually start listening to podcasts and start joining the conversation about what you want to do. And that, too, I want to stress is so many people are so general with their virtual assistants.
Right.
And you can't be. You have to get specific. And, it's something that you think, oh, God, nobody's going to want that service. But you'd be surprised. I have an accountability partner, and she does editing. And that is very unusual. And it's very in demand for, when it comes to ebooks or any kind of books. So get as specific as you possibly can.
Right.
And like I love web research. My trait is really online bookkeeping, which I do because I know it, but what I love to do is web research. So when you're doing your virtual assistant business, don't say just general admin services. Be specific.
Right. I remember that about you, and I remember, and still to this day, because for me, web research is like a yawn.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always remembered thinking, well, that's awesome, and like I admire you because you have that skill, because it's just something that does not interest me.
Well, and people are like, what's web research? And
right.
One example is I have a client that they need to know what the sore points or the problems are with their clients. So I go onto forums and I search for those topics that they have issues with, and then I create a list for them so they can create their blog topics on those sore points. Nice.
My hat is tipped off to you, because that's not something I would be able to even know where to begin.
Right.
So
and it's a learning curve, I guess.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I love that, you said hone in on, being specific in your podcast, and then offering some ways to network. And it's basically networking with people in your industry.
Correct. Yep. Mine happen to be the virtual assistant industry, but let's say there again, even with social media, don't say you're social media strategist for just anybody. Get specific about the industry. If you want it to be for, let's say, entertainment, get specific. So.
Right. This has been a fun chat. And you had mentioned that you have a new podcast. So tell me a little bit about your podcast, and then also, to wrap things up, where people can go to learn more about the podcast and your business.
Well, the podcast is called Virtual Team 360, a subcontracting concept. And basically what I do on the podcast is I bring on guests that are industry leaders, usually multi-VA firms or service providers that have actually used the subcontracting concept in their own business to profit from it. And I'm really excited because in February, and there again, little did I know, but the Disney industry business providers actually use subcontracting as well. So I've got a couple Disney small business owners that are going to be guests, and they are going to share with us how they are using subcontracting virtual teams to grow their business.
That's fun. That's a true full circle if I have not heard one.
Yeah. And they can find my podcast on SavvySubcontracting.com, and on there under the the titles at the top it says podcast, and they can sign up to receive more information about the podcast, what we're going to be talking about each month, and then the replays are right on the website as well.
Awesome. And that's the same website where they can go and look for you and find more information about you and your business as well, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Collette, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast and catching up and sharing, your business and what you've been doing now.
And thank you again for having me, Darlene. I enjoyed it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Collette, for being a guest on the podcast. You can learn more about Collette and find links to her website in this episode's show notes, found at dvpodcasts.com. Just look for episode 14 on the website. You can also connect with me on Twitter. I would love to hear from you. You can find me at Darlene Victoria. You can also send me an email, feedback, questions, darlene@darlenevictoria.com. And finally, if you would like to subscribe to the podcast, you can do so on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn, or subscribe by email over at dvpodcasts.com. Just click the subscribe link in the navigation, and all subscribers will receive a free copy of my ebook, The Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide. That does it for this week's episode. I'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode where my guest will be Carol Sanick, co-host of the podcast, The Crazy Marketing Ladies Show. So it's a fantastic conversation, and you won't want to miss it. So join me in a couple weeks for episode 15. Until then, remember, be inspired by the most important person in your life, you. Thanks for listening. This is Darlene Victoria, signing out.